All right, welcome everyone. I'm Tee&D and I'm back to make another character. I did a bunch of this last night. I think I did 3 total builds last night, which is kind of crazy. I haven't gone and edited any of them or done anything. I'm obsessed with doing this. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, so I'm gonna do it again. We did 3 builds last night. One of them was like 2 hours long. One of them was like an hour and a half long, and one of them was like half an hour long. But we built 3 good old characters based off of random rolled stats. And of course, selecting those stats, we had our level 6 sort of catch 22. Shoutouts to D&D Optimized as before. Our Blade Singer Wizard and our Tiefling Rogue Hexblade multi-class thing that wasn't super powerful but was really cool, and I really like the story around it of this like dumbass rogue who is conned into stealing a powerful magical artifact, and then it starts taking over his mind, and that sounds really cool to me. So we've got a dope Blade Singer that I think is pretty competitive in terms of expected damage output, a pretty cool Warlock that's not as competitive but still really cool and still great, and could be more competitive for sure if we did what we talked about and were to go and do custom lineage and like get a couple more feats. If those feats are allowed at their table and you don't mind using them, then there's nothing wrong with that. I personally don't like building characters around Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master. I find them deeply centralizing, and I like to look at all the other features that are available to characters than this one mechanical out-of-game weird thing that doesn't really make sense to me and doesn't really feel like any of the rest of the game the way that it works. Like there's nothing else in the game that gives that kind of a flat damage bonus for a trade-off, and it's a cool idea, but in practice it's really centralizing and really powerful, and I don't like it very much. So those are the characters that we built. I think of these 3, I really like the Blade Singer. I would love to play a Blade Singer like that. It would be very fun. I also really like the Sorkadin that we built. The hard-hitting, maul-wielding, big-ass Sorkadin who uses a combination of the Crusher feat with Booming Blade and the ability to cast Cloud of Daggers to do some pretty insane damage round after round, or at least for one round. With an upcast Cloud of Daggers, we were doing, I think, 12 d4 of damage, plus 2d6, plus 4d8 from Smite or something, which is kind of nuts. And there's the potential that if we built it a little differently, we could get advantage on that attack and be doing really, really well for ourselves. It's a really cool build, and I like it a lot. But I want to go ahead and roll up another one, roll some stats, and see what we end up with, and see if we can come up with a build relatively quickly that will be relatively fun. For your information, it's about 3 p.m. right now. I have recorded Retro Monday Overdrive for the day. Already done, diddly did that. It was great, and I look forward to you seeing what I watched, because it's weird and interesting. But then I went ahead and I ate a meal. I ate myself some Quito chorizo chili, which was delicious, and I'm letting that settle into my belly. But then in about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half, my friend is going to come and we're going to go to the gym. So gym time is soon, so I've got a time limit on this video. Probably it won't take that whole time limit, but I do have a time limit, and I want these videos to be relatively not as long as the first one that took me like 2.5 hours, though granted, some of that was just me sitting there going, what do I do? And I'll probably cut it out if I ever upload it. But, yeah, so let's go ahead and go in. We've got, it says Tee&D's character. I'm just going to randomize Zilnan. That reminds me of Zillion from League of Legends, which I don't like that game, but I'm still going to change it to Zillion for now because that's interesting. And immediately, as soon as I see that, part of the reason I wanted to do that randomization was it gives me some ideas. Immediately, I start thinking of time and warping of fate and knowledge, and maybe floating would be cool. All these are cool ideas that maybe will factor into our build as we move along. I think I'm going to leave Critical Role content off. If I decide that there's a character class or something that I want from Critical Role, I'll do it, but there are some duplicated things, like Eladrin being duplicated and half-orcs or orcs of Exandria being duplicated that I don't really want, so I'm going to leave Critical Role content off for now. Dice rolling, absolutely. Optional class features and customize your origin are on. We'll leave the multi-class requirements. We'll keep fixed hit points because I don't actually want to spend the time to worry about rolling them, even though I find it fun. Privacy, public, no reason to hide it. And standard encumbrance, all that jazz, we're good to go. We're not going to choose race. We're not going to choose class. We're going to roll some ability scores. So let's do that immediately. First set of rolls, and as before, I think it's still reasonable. Maybe I'll change it up a little bit. I'm going to say, in the previous couple of builds, I've given myself 3 dice roll groups, and in, I think, at least 2 of those builds, the third group was the one that I ended up going for. Now, it's still random. It's a possibility that we get a strong or an interesting set of dice rolls on our first set of rolls, and that's great. But I'm going to make it a little bit narrower and a little bit more restrictive and only give myself 2 to choose from. Still, I get a choice, and at the very least, if I roll 2 terrible rolls, I'll at least get to pick my poison, and that's good. But we're going to just limit it to 2, and hopefully that restriction leads to some interesting innovations. We'll see. I'm going to go ahead and roll the first dice roll group. I'm going to keep it on camera the whole time so you know that I'm not cheating and you see me do it. Let's go. All right, that's a great start. We need other scores to flesh it out. A 14, a 12. 16, that's lovely. Not as good. Not as good. Not as good. But reasonable all around. 16, 14, 12 sucks. It would be great to have a higher score on a third thing, of course. And of course, it would also be great if this were an 18, and 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 this were an 18. But we can't always get what you want. So, this is a reasonable set of scores. I will choose this if I have to. Immediately looking at it, nothing super jumps out at me, except that we can put this in Dex and wear medium armor and be happy, and have this as a primary ability score and something else if we'd like to, and that would be pretty okay. There are a lot of reasonable things that we could do with this kind of a stat roll. Very cool. This character is not going to be good at a lot of things, but they might be optimizable to be really good at one thing at least, and that's usually good enough for a D&D character. Let's roll our second stat set and see what we come up with. Okay, immediately a 15. That's a good start. And a 16. Already we're stronger, but what else will we get? A 10 to match our 10. A 10 to match our 10. A low, low score. And a 13. Okay. So, we're choosing basically between 16, 14, 12, average, 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 and 16, 15, 13, average, average, average. I think, or average, average, low. I think for me, the way that I like to play characters, I'd rather have an interesting dump stat that defines the character in some way, and a 13 to place somewhere, and like 1 higher in my secondary score. Having this 15 is actually really nice, because it means that if we want to, at some point, we could maybe choose a +2, +1 race and have an 18 and a 16. Excuse me, an 18 and a 16 in some starting stats, or even be a half elf, be +2, +1, +1, have an 18, a 16, and a 14, and that would be really cool. I think either way we go, this is, despite being a little less strong in some places, obviously a more interesting stat block to me, and so I'm immediately going to nix this one, and I'm going to choose this one, and I'm going to go ahead and just delete this first group and take what we've got here. Now, the question becomes, where did these stats go? Well, in part, I'm going to be meta here, and I'm going to say that we've done a Paladorkidin whatever thing that's all Ka-based mostly, and strength-based. We've done that sort of Dexy-ish, but Ka-based Hexblade builds. That's 2 Ka-based builds, and an Int-based build. So with this build, I think I would love to either build for strength or wisdom or both. That's going to be, I think, what I want to do here. So, what do we do to make that happen? What kinds of classes and options and ideas and things can we do to make a strengthy, wisdomy typey character? I think pretty obviously we want to look toward Druid and Cleric, as well as keeping an eye on Fighter and Barbarian. And we might keep an eye out for reasons to potentially go Monk, but I don't think I want to build a Monk. It doesn't seem like what I would like to do, and we don't really have the split of multiple attribute dependent ability scores that would make a Monk very happy. So I'm leaning toward more like Druid or something in that vein, and that would be very good, very cool. Let's think about it for a second. I think the only feat at level 1 race that's really tempting here, Custom Lineage is a little bit tempting because a +2 to our main stat would be dope as hell. But the only one that I'm really tempted by would be Variant Human, to have 2 16s to start and a 14. Because we could, again, put the 14 in dexterity, ignore heavy armor, run with medium armor for our entire career, and never have to worry about dex again, and that's really strong. And then we could pump a 16 into, for example, our wisdom, and maybe a 16 into our constitution, or perhaps into our strength, depending on how we want to build. I think I'm going to lean toward the idea of making this character wisdom sad, which is wisdom single attribute dependent, and also kind of versatile and fun. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to totally avoid taking a feat at first level, which is crazy. It's crazy to do that. And instead, I'm going to choose the most powerful in terms of racial ability score bonuses class or most powerful race that I can think of. And I think that it's pretty obvious that that is the half-elf. And I think it's pretty obvious that it is the base half-elf, but I am going to spend some time checking some of the other half-elf variants to see if there's anything in there that screams to me of deep value. One thing that definitely jumps out to me as valuable would be the high half-elf's cantrip, because a wisdom-based character that can pick up one intelligence-based cantrip might be really cool, because there's a little bit of an interaction there that's very, very nice and very fun, and we might want to make use of it. But I'm not sure we can or will want to right now. Regardless, let me look at all the half-elf variants. So we can choose, we can forego skill versatility, which hurts, and grab instead elf weapon training or cantrip. That's pretty neat. It is pretty neat. I don't mind that at all. But do we lose one of our +1s when we do that? Nope. The high half-elf still gets 2 other ability scores of your choice by +1. I think that's super worth it. We miss out on 2 skill proficiencies, but we gain a cantrip that we won't be able to get from anywhere else, for the most part. For mostly, probably. That's kind of neat. I like that idea quite a bit. It's quite cool. A wood half-elf can gain elf weapon training, fleet of foot, or mask of the wild, all of which are cool. I don't think any of them are as cool as that cantrip I would want. I think you can guess probably which cantrip I'm thinking of, but I think I would want it. The drow is definitely interesting. They have dark vision, they don't get sunlight sensitivity, but they can get drow magic, giving them dancing lights, fairy fire, and darkness. And all of those are really interesting. We won't have the abilities to make use of darkness super well without some significant investment in other things, or perhaps the Eldritch Adept feat or something like that. And I don't want to build around Darkness Devil's Sight, because I just don't want to. I'd rather think about using fairy fire to grant us advantage, because that's far more interesting to me, I think. But I don't know if it's really the best move. I think my initial inclination is to go with the high half-elf to grab our ability score increases, and we are going to use Tasha's, so I'm going to click the Origin Ability Score Increase button there, and we'll be able to swap those. So our ability score increase by 2 is going to be our wisdom, and then it's going to be our dexterity and our constitution for the +1s. Let's go actually plop our stats into place so that we can see how that changes things. We'll pump this into wisdom. We will put this into our constitution because we want to be healthy, and we're going to put this into our dexterity and bring it up to a 14. Everything else is going to be interesting. Well, where does our bad score go? We're in sort of the same conundrum as we were in before. If we put it in charisma, we're just dislikable. If we put it in intelligence, that actually really hurts us if we're going one of the routes that we go, partly because we're going to be casting an intelligence-based cantrip, although that's not going to matter too much because the cantrip we will choose, it's still important. And also, as a wisdom-based caster, it would be really great if we had the ability to make certain skill checks relatively okay, at least at not a negative. Those checks being specifically nature and maybe religion. Those seem like things that we want to be not the worst in the world at. And so, because it really doesn't have much of a downside for us, I'm going to put the 7 into strength, and I'm going to put our 10s into Ka and intelligence. We are by no means the most charismatic or intelligent individual in the world, but at least we're not a blithering idiot or a blathering fool, both of which are good things for us. This is a pretty primo set of stats starting off. The 7 hurts, but it doesn't hurt that much considering we don't care about using strength for most things, and all in all, we seem to be doing pretty well for ourselves. We've got an 18 in our primary casting stat, probably, assuming that we keep that as our primary casting stat, and we probably will. And that's really nice. That's like really nice. Cool. What's next? What else do we want to do with this character? Well, we've chosen a race. We have our high half-elf descent, and we are going to choose that cantrip. Now, elf weapon training would also be cool. Proficiency with long sword, short sword, short bow, and longbow, but it's actually going to harm us in the long run because there's something better that we can do for weapons if we'd like to. First and foremost, we're going to choose our high elf descent cantrip, and the cantrip of choice is going to be Booming Blade. Now, I think there's a thematic and legitimate reason if you want to choose Green Flame Blade here instead. It's a great cantrip. It deals more damage to multiple creatures. If you think you're going to be fighting groups of enemies more frequently than big single enemies, then Green Flame Blade is probably the way to go. But for our purposes, for my purposes, for the way that I see this character building out, and I will be fair with you that the way that I'm going to build this character is going to be similar to a build that I've done before, because it will. Sometimes things are centralizing because they're powerful, and Booming Blade is one of those things. But I'm going to build this out in a way that you might not expect, and it might end up being really cool. I want to build a melee-focused druid. Weird. Rough. Druids aren't the best at melee in general. They're just not the best at it. But there are some class features and some ideas and some options and some things that might make druids really nice for our purposes here. So, I'm going to build a melee-focused druid. We know Common, Elvish, and one extra language. I don't know. Could be whatever. I usually, on druids, I like to grab Primordial. You get 4 languages for the price of 1, essentially. You get Aquan, Ignan, Earthen, whatever they are. And that's really cool. And also, you get to talk to elementals and stuff. And that's kind of useful, maybe. It can be, at least. And that's kind of neat. I think we are also going to... I will think about this. There's a possibility that 1 level in fighter might be worthwhile, but I think, and it hurts to do this, I think that being a straight class druid might be our move. I think either way we go, though, well, there is another thing to it, which is that, gosh golly goodness gracious, starting with proficiency in Constitution saving throws on a goddamn druid is so good. Ranger gives us strength and dexterity and doesn't give us a fighting style. If we're building a melee-focused druid, it might behoove us to start with fighter. Give me a sec to check a subclass feature and see if I think it's worth the trade-off. And then I have to check actually the wording on Green Flame Blade, because it might matter quite a bit. Okay. So, there's something that actually really does matter here. I think it might behoove us, it might be worthwhile to take Green Flame Blade as our cantrip regardless. I don't think it's as good as Booming Blade in this situation, but I think I might take it because it's thematically more interesting. I think Booming Blade is more powerful, especially with the way that I envision this character working, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But, because the melee attack at 5th level deals an extra 1d8 fire damage to the target on hit, and the fire damage to the second creature increases to 1d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier, and you cause green fire to leap from the target to a different creature, the second creature takes fire damage equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. It's hard to say. The only time when this will affect our character's damage, even a little bit, might be at level 6. I think that if you want to do the Booming Blade version of this character, you start with a level in Fighter and you go 5 into Druid. If you want to do the Green Flame Blade and go all in on Firepower, which is reasonable, then you start with Green Flame Blade and you try very hard, very, very hard to convince your DM that when you roll for the extra 1d8 of fire damage to the target on a hit, and the extra d8 plus spellcasting ability modifier of fire damage to the other creature, that it's the same roll. Convince your DM that it's 1d8 and 1d8, and it should be the same damage roll. If you can swing this, you should be 6 Druid. If you can't swing this, you shouldn't take Green Flame Blade. It's not worth it. But if you can convince them that it is the same damage roll and the same spell, It's very powerful and very, very cool. But you probably won't be able to, and it depends on your DM, so we won't say that we'll definitely do it. However, I am going to build this character out with Green Flame Blade for right now and without taking the fighter level to see where we end up with, because it's going to equate to more damage for us overall. I think. Regardless. Little cut here so that I don't spoil stuff. We are starting off as a level 1 Druid. Druids are great. Druids are fucking wonderful as level 1s. We're also going to take the second level. We're going to choose our optional features now. The additional Druid spells, gaining protection from good and evil, continual flame, enlarge, reduce, and summon beast. All of these I think are already meshed in. I don't think I have to click this to make them happen. I think they're already included after Tasha's, and that's great. We are going to take the Wild Companion feature and the Cantrip Versatility feature because both of them are cool. Wild Companion in particular might be something that we use every fucking time, all the fucking time. But maybe not. It does require an expenditure of a wild shape, and the familiar only is summoned for a number of hours equal to half your druid level. But the familiar only disappears after that number of hours. It doesn't disappear when you take a short rest, which means that you could summon your familiar, and assuming you're like a druid 5 or a druid 6, you're going to keep that familiar for 2 to 3 hours, and you can just take a short rest and get your wild shapes back, and that might be really good for you. And there's no real limitation on it. You just cast the Find Familiar spell without material components as an action without spending the 10 minutes. That's really good. That's really cool. Will it be entirely useful for us? I don't know, but I think that if you have the chance to use it, and you feel like you're not going to need your other expenditure of wild shape, it might be worthwhile to do that. As for our spells of choice at first level, we are grabbing Shalala. This is the only spell that I think we absolutely must have at this level. As far as other things that we should probably consider grabbing, I think it would behoove us immensely to prepare Healing Word, to prepare, if we'd like to, we could prepare Goodberry as well as a different option, and that would be fine too. I think we might as well prepare both because we have 5 fucking spells prepped because we have High Wisdom, which is really good for us. Fairy Fire for concentration, grant advantage, and remove invisibility. Amazing. And then one like AoE spell, maybe. I think actually we're going to be up in melee. I want Absorb Elements because it's really good, and because we're going to be making melee weapon attacks with our Shillelagh, we'll be able to dish out some of that extra damage back at whoever is throwing fireballs or whatever at us, and we'll probably keep that prepared for the rest of our adventuring career. We don't have a ranged attack option, and so I think we're going to grab Thorn Whip because forcing enemy movement is really useful. Also, I as a DM let Thorn Whip be really versatile. I will let druids fucking swing from the ceilings if they want to and can make an ability check regarding Thorn Whip to make their spell strong enough. I've had a druid fall off of a 100-foot building and use Thorn Whip to catch themselves for just a moment long enough for the rest of their party to run over and grab the thorns and pull them up, maybe taking a point of damage in the process. I think Thorn Whip, if you read it and you use it as intended, it can be a really versatile skill, and there's a reason for that. I think that there's no reason that you can't argue that you could Thorn Whip to something and then pull yourself the same distance toward it that you would be able to pull another creature. Like, why not? It seems cool to me. It seems really nice to give your druid like the ability to grapple around and stuff, and that means that we're pretty cool. We've got like a thorny grappling hook, and that's fucking sick. We could take whatever other spells we want. I think we've got 1 prep slot left. We've got our healing spell. We've got our Goodberry, which we can cast at the beginning of the day and have 10 healing berries, which is super lovely. Nothing wrong with that, as long as we can find some non-magical berries as components around us. I guess we just need a sprig of mistletoe. We don't even need berries. So that's super cool. Oh yeah, the 10 berries just appear in your hand. That's actually, I thought that was different. Very cool. And we could grab whatever we want. We could grab Speak with Animals, which would let us speak with our familiar or whatever, and that might be neat and thematic. We could grab something like Thunderwave, just in case we get crowded up in combat and we want to blast things away from us. I think for my purposes, I'm just going to grab Detect Magic, let's say, because it's infinitely useful to have, and it's a ritual spell, and I think we can ritual cast as a druid. Like, we're ritual casters, right? Ritual casting. You can cast a druid spell as a ritual if that spell has the ritual tag and you have the spell prepared. Oh, you do have to have it prepared. That sucks, but whatever. We can ritual cast Detect Magic, and that's very useful even for a level 1 party. Lovely. Starting off with our skill proficiencies, we're going to want to grab all of the wisdom-based proficiencies if we can get them, but we're going to have to look at our background as well. So we are a high half-elf who has chosen the way of druidicness. Hermit background stands out to me as being something useful. Medicine and religion are cool. We get a tool check, which we could grab like herbalism or something like that, although I think we already get that as a druid, so we don't need it. Herbalism kit. We just already get it. It's cool. We also get proficiencies in clubs, daggers, darts, javelins, maces, quarterstaffs, scimitars, sickles, slings, and spears. And we gain proficiency with light and medium armor, as well as shields, but we will not use shields or light armor or armor made of metal, although this has been talked about many times, and it's sort of a weird meta restriction that you don't have to abide by, but we have no reason not to abide by it, so that's fine. Also, in most cases, there's no reason that you can't convince your DM that you could make, like, breastplate armor out of leather, because that's a reasonable thing to expect. Let me go through some of the other backgrounds and see if anything strikes me as much better for us in terms of proficiencies and stuff, or just seems to make more sense for us. Ooh, that's groovy. I actually really like the Far Traveler background. Consider ourselves as potentially a high half-elf, who maybe doesn't have much of a home of their own, and instead has chosen to wander the world and travel near and far, finding new things and new plants and animals and new creatures and discovering as we go, and perhaps burning a trail of wrath and death and destruction in our wake, but probably not. Probably trying to integrate with the life-giving forces of rebirth and renewal that are represented by our particular affinity toward fire, which we will get into in just a moment. We get insight and perception skill proficiencies, both of which are on our proficiencies list, but open up our choices for other useful things. We get an additional language. We've already got Primordial, Elvish, and Common. So perhaps we have spent some time living amongst dwarves or something similar. Or perhaps we have talked frequently to our celestial patron. Take whatever language you think is going to be most useful for you. Perhaps, I always think this is a very useful language, perhaps we have spent time living in back alleys and dark streets and come to understand some of the undercommon spoken by the downtrodden and underground races of this world. Whatever you think is most viable, go for. I'm going to grab Dwarvish, I think. Just because maybe we were given some kind of kindness unexpectedly by a dwarf or something, and that's really cool for us. And we're going to grab a flute, because I think that sounds right to me. Also, it's cheap, and we're going to be probably doing gold buy, and we're probably not going to be very wealthy when we start off. So we're going to need something. Cool. As for our chosen druid proficiencies, we've got a bunch now. I think we can just simply grab two of the other wisdom-based skills, those being animal handling, medicine, and survival. I think for our purposes, we want to lean into that idea of fire as renewal and rejuvenation and grab medicine, which will be useful potentially for stabilizing our allies, though hopefully we will have spells in order to just get them up. And we will be quite capable of solid healing if we'd like to with this build, though our purpose is not to be a primary healer. It is definitely something we will be versatile enough to do. And then I think if we are a traveler who is used to wandering this world, being good at survival checks, tracking animals in the forest, figuring out where we are, determining the time of day, determining the direction that we need to go, all of these things are powerfully and valuably useful for us. Wonderful. Now, let's go ahead and check. If we chose gold, our starting gold would be 2d4. 4 times 10 is 40 gold pieces, and that's not very good. So I think, despite everything else, we are going to start with the starting equipment. So we will have poorly wrought maps of our homeland, one set of traveler's clothes. We will get a musical instrument with which we are proficient. Ooh, because we're proficient in it, I'm getting my favorite musical instrument of all the instruments because we just get to grab it. I'm going to be proficient in the pan flute instead, but it's way more expensive than a flute, so I don't normally buy them. So we will grab ourselves that musical instrument that we are proficient with, the pan flute. I think that's more thematic anyway. Wonderful. And we have a 10 gold pieces of jewelry that we will not sell because it's worth too much to us. How lovely. We've got leather armor, an explorer's pack, and a druidic focus. We will take a sprig of mistletoe because it is the component of our goodberry spell. And so we would love to have that. Obviously, having the druidic focus means that the component isn't necessary, but it makes sense to me. I think the sprig of mistletoe as a thing that is like rebirth and stuff like that works very well, and it's probably my favorite of the druidic focuses. However, most of the time, we will be using a particular simple melee weapon, a quarterstaff. Now, to be clear, you may have to argue with this with your DM. You get a wooden staff as your druidic focus if you'd like to, and it is a 10 gold piece wooden staff, I think. It might be less than that, that is your druidic focus and is usable as a focus. I see no reason why you can't use that stick to bonk people over the head with, and I see no reason why you couldn't use a quarterstaff to cast spells with. If your DM has a problem with either of those things, you're going to have problems dealing with that. I'm sorry. I, as a DM, will tell you that as long as you're holding a stick, you can cast magic through it. You're fine. I will let anyone use a quarterstaff as their magic casting stick, and if they likewise, if you have to choose the wooden staff druidic focus, see if your DM will let you use it as a quarterstaff. There's no reason that they shouldn't, and I think there are sage advice that you can find that explicitly say that that's reasonable to do, and I think it is fully reasonable to do. For me, I'm going to grab the sprig of mistletoe and the quarterstaff, and I'm also going to grab us a wooden shield because it is very nice to have, especially because we don't care too much about two-handing our quarterstaff for reasons that we will get into quite shortly. All right, we add our starting equipment, and that leaves us with our starting stuff. Now, our leather armor is 10 gold pieces, and we have 5 gold pieces and a 10 gold piece of jewelry that I don't want to spend. Let me go and look at armor really quick and see if there's anything that would give us a significant benefit that we are proficient in that would be cheap enough to purchase and is not made of metal. For example, I will not pretend that a chain shirt could be made out of scales because that seems foolish. Scale mail, however, could be made out of scales, and it's really good. It will give us disadvantage on our stealth checks, which sucks, but it might be worth it anyway. Now, hide armor kind of fucking sucks. It would only put us at a 14 AC, plus shield takes us to 16, which is not bad. But by the same note, if we can save up for a breastplate, that'll put us at an 18 total with our shield, and if we can save up for scale mail, that'll put us at an 18 total with our shield, but we'll have disadvantage on stealth checks. I think what we're going to do for our character today, for right now, right at this moment, is we're going to say that we're going to start off with hide armor, and I'm going to suggest that a generous DM will let you straight up trade 10 gold pieces for leather armor, which is well crafted, and instead get the more thematic 10 gold pieces for some jank, smelly, stinky hide armor that we've thrown together from the animals that we've used every part of, because we're a druid. We use every part of the animals that if we have to slay them, we will use every part of them. And people looking at us might notice that our hide armor at this level is a little bit scorched, is a little bit burned up, as though we perhaps burned the creature that we were taking the fur from. And that's pretty cool. That's a cool idea to me, like sort of raggedy like mink pelts and otter fur and other furs and pelts all together to create hide armor around our sort of barbarian-y, far traveler, stinky druid who goes around to places and is just wearing this hide. That seems perfectly beautifully thematic to me, and I like it a lot. We're gonna don our shield, wield our quarterstaff, and wear our hide armor. We've got a bedroll, a mess kit, a pan flute, a couple of days of rations, some rope, a tinderbox, some torches, a water skin, and 5 gold in our pocket, as well as a 10 gold piece gem or piece of jewelry with us. Now, is there anything else we desperately want for a couple of gold pieces? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Oh, just because it's dumb to not start with one, I'm going to say that within our first level of gameplay, we're going to go and buy an herbalism kit for 5 gold. In fact, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to buy an herbalism kit, and we're broke as fuck. But it's useful for us. We can make potions. That's very good to have. And we can add a proficiency bonus to checks to identify or apply herbs, as well as this proficiency is required to create antitoxin and any potions of healing. I think with a long rest, we can produce 1 potion of healing at half cost, and that's going to be great for us in the future. We'll be able to create these sort of non-combat heals or in-combat heals that we can hand out to our friends or hold on to for ourselves, or even perhaps give to a familiar if we've got one summoned. And those are all very useful things to have in a sense where it's not super obvious on your character sheet that this is useful. But since we get the proficiency as a druid, we're going to make use of it. And basically, anytime we have 25 gold pieces to spend on herbs and shit, or if we can convince our DM that we go out and collect some herbs and shit and use those, we're going to try to make a healing potion after a long rest. And we're not going to try to sell them because our druid probably doesn't care that much about money in general, and isn't going to be doing this as a business, although they could make a very profitable business, doubling their money every time they build a potion, which is a reasonable thing to do if you want to do that as a downtime activity and just double money. Whatever you have to invest in potions, you just double it every day by making a certain number of potions and then selling them to somebody who will buy them. That's fantastic. For our purposes, though, these are to keep us and our friends and our companions and natural things out in the world alive, and that's our purpose. So here's our druid level 1. We don't have wild shape yet, so a lot of our core features don't come together at the moment, but we're sitting pretty at a 16 armor class as a level 1 character. That's fucking great. We don't have disadvantage on any of our checks. Our insight and medicine, perception, and survival checks are top tier. We're not awful at stealth or other dexterity things. We've got a whole bunch of plus zeros, so a bunch of skills we don't want to use, and we desperately want to stay away from doing athletics for anything. But we have our head on a swivel. Our passive perception and passive insight are very high for this level. Our int and whiz saving throws are great. We're really hard to mind control. Not that anything should be mind controlling us at this level, but we are really hard to mind control. We're not smart. We're not charismatic, but we are very perceptive, and we are very useful to have in a party. We're great at keeping watch when everybody else is asleep, and we're great at doing other stuff. One thing you might notice is that our quarterstaff sucks. 1d6 minus 2, 1d8 minus 2 if it's versatile. That's rough. Luckily, we came up with a way to shore that weakness up, and that is, of course, the Shillelagh cantrip. This is a cantrip that we cast as a bonus action and cast upon our stick, our staff, and it turns it into a 1d8 plus our wisdom modifier magic weapon. That's fucking awesome. Immediately, this shores up our hugest weakness in our build and makes our character very solid in melee. About as solid as a non-optimized martial character, which is good. That's really good, actually. It's also important to note that there is a specific restriction on spell casting whenever you cast a spell as a bonus action. Shillelagh is a cantrip, and it is a spell that we cast as a bonus action. And the rules for bonus action casting say that when you cast a spell as a bonus action, the only other spell that you can cast on the same turn is a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. So, for example, we could not cast bonus action Shillelagh and then Fairy Fire on the same round as our setup round. We just couldn't do it because it would break the bonus action spellcasting rules. However, if we had another cantrip that we wanted to cast as an action, we could totally do that because we just cast a cantrip as a bonus action and then we can cast a cantrip as an action, and there's no contradiction. So, our initial round of combat will look like such. We will run up to an enemy. While we run, we will cast Shillelagh on our stick, and hopefully you can convince your DM that you don't have to doff your shield in order to perform the somatic components of this, given that you are holding the spellcasting focus in your hand. Hopefully you should be able to make those somatic components like this. If you have to, have it stowed and use a sprig of mistletoe to cast it on the Shillelagh and then drop the mistletoe and grab the stick, it can get complicated, and I'm sorry if your DM's a jerk about this. Warcaster might be something you want to pick up at level 1 for various reasons. Or like a Ruby of the War Mage, if you can get your hands on it, talk to your DM about figuring out a way around it. Personally, I would allow a character to cast a spell upon themselves that just makes them acceptable in combat in their first round. I would just let it happen. Not all DMs will be so forgiving. If you need to drop your shield or not use a shield, which really hurts. In order to make this work, as your DM would say, then that's a thing. If you can't convince them that you can hold the sprig of mistletoe in your shield arm with a wooden shield that's strapped to your arm, and cast the spell on your stick, and then keep going, I don't know. I think it's reasonable to expect that you could convince a DM to let you do any of these things, but your table may vary and your experience may vary, and thus your level 1 with this character may vary significantly. But my concept for this character is that you will cast Shillelagh on your weapon, run up to an enemy. Hopefully, it would be lovely if you could run up to 2 enemies who are standing next to each other within 5 feet, since we are using the Green Flame Blade version of this build. You will hit them with a Green Flame Blade. You will cast the Green Flame Blade spell, which is, of course, a cantrip, and thus you can do so. You will hit them with your +6 to hit with your Shillelagh. Deal 1d8 plus 4 magical bludgeoning damage to them with your magic stick. Bonk. And then whoosh, fire will burn out for an extra 4 damage to a creature standing next to them. Now, we can't really calc that 4 damage in, because it's not reasonable to expect that there will always be a creature standing next to them, but when there is, it'll be a nice buff to our overall DPR. In general, our damage is pretty good. It's not bad at all. I think you could say that our single target damage might be a little bit better with Booming Blade, but also, we don't have any way to incentivize a creature to move away from Booming Blade and take that extra booming damage, so maybe it wouldn't be better. Maybe it would be just about the same, and that's totally cool with us. Regardless, I think we're pretty solid for this level of a character. We've got a high AC for what we are. We deal good damage. We've got a good to hit a DC, and in general, we're chilling. We're dealing 6 damage. We're dealing 5 damage. We're dealing 10 damage per round. That's very good for this type of a character. We also have 11 hit points, which is not squishy for a character this at this level. We've got +3 to our con, and we're a D8 hit die. So honestly, we're doing really well. We are pretty survivable. We're pretty healthy. We are likely to see things coming or see traps coming with perception and insight. We're doing great. And if we need to, we've got a bunch of other options in combat. If we decide that our 1d8 plus 4 damage, plus maybe some extra damage if somebody's next to them, and we can use Green Flame Blade to its greatest effect, isn't worth it, in which case we could cast Healing Word and revive an ally, or something else. We got tons of options. Or we could even cast Fairy Fire and hope that that grants advantage to us and all of our allies for the duration, but it might not work, it might not stick, yada yada. This is a great level for us. We're doing great. So, as we would expect for any good level 1 character, barring getting crit by a couple of goblins, we're hopefully going to survive and live on in the world until level 2. So we're going to keep our hit points at the middling the average hit points, because that's reasonable, and we have 19 hit points now. We go up by a full 8, because it's 5 per level for a d8, and then +3 from our con, and that's lovely. We're healthy. We almost double our hit points almost every level. That's fantastic. And we get our Druid circle, and as you may have guessed, there are a lot of Druid circles out here, and a lot of them are really good. They're great. But there are 2 that absolutely stand out to me as melee fighters, as valuable in melee combat. Actually, there are 3. One of those 3 is the Circle of the Moon. I think if you want to build an optimized melee druid, Circle of the Moon is overpowered in a lot of cases, at a lot of levels. It's also deeply underpowered and deeply underwhelming in certain circumstances, because they didn't really build the list of beasts as a thing that would be like part of a character, and that makes things weird. There are times when you'll be able to turn into a monster that's just a beast that's way better than being yourself, and there are times when it just seems really silly to turn into anything. But Circle of the Moon, pretty fucking cool. Great out-of-the-box combat melee druid. You turn into beasts, you do it as a bonus action, you turn into bigger beasts than anybody else, that's great. Circle of Spores is also really cool, but it's different and weird. You get some cool spells, an extra cantrip, some other stuff, and you get Symbiotic Entity. You get a bunch of temporary hit points, and every time you attack, you deal an extra 1d6 necrotic damage to any target they hit. If we can get a bunch of attacks in some way and stack that with this, that's great. Unfortunately, this subclass requires a lot of investment into Druid because we require more of these temporary hit points. When we lose these temporary hit points, we lose the feature, we lose the extra damage. So if we're in melee combat, we need a lot more of those temporary hit points, and it highly incentivizes us to gain methods of damage resistance, like being partly barbarian and being able to rage. Shoutouts to Moonshine motherfucking Simon, the highest damage dealing druid that I've ever seen, was obviously using the Unearthed Arcana version of this subclass, and is one level into Barbarian and a whole bunch of levels into Druid, and it has been given some cool things like a big magic great axe that is literally a flame tongue and deals a bunch of extra damage and is super awesome. And she deals Buko Banko 1 attack per round with a cantrip damage. It's great. She's wonderful and good for her. I don't think Spores is the way for us. And I've hinted at it before, but I think there's only one subclass that I want to choose, and it is the Circle of Wildfire. This has quickly become my favorite druid circle easily, with absolute ease. This circle is so fucking cool to me. I like it a lot. I think it's very cool. So, as an action, you can use expend one use of your wild shape feature to summon your wildfire spirit rather than assuming a beast form. The spirit appears in an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you, and it immediately deals some AoE 2d6 of fire damage against your spell save DC to everyone when it appears within 10 feet of the creature when it appears, anyone other than you. So you can summon it right next to yourself and not take damage, which is lovely. It's friendly to you, it obeys your commands, and it has these stat blocks which use your proficiency bonus. The spirit shares your initiative count, but takes your turn immediately after yours, and the only action it takes on its turn is the dodge action, unless you take a bonus action on your turn to command it to take another action. That action could be one in its stat block or some other action. If you are incapacitated, the spirit can take any action of its choice, not just dodge. The spirit manifests for 1 hour until it is reduced to 0 hit points or until you use this feature again. Great. So, we have a wild fiery beastie creature. It comes in with no scaling armor. It has 5 hit points plus 5 times your druid level, meaning that the more druid levels we get, the beefier this guy gets. Currently, it'll start off with 10 plus 5 is 15 hit points, which is pretty good. It can move 30 feet per round, and it can fly 30 feet with hover, which means that it doesn't fall if it stops. That's wonderful. It's also fully immune to fire damage, and is immune to being charmed, frightened, grappled, prone, or restrained, all of which are lovely things that lots of low-level creatures can do to you or your friends, and make this thing pretty resilient in a lot of ways. It's lovely. Its challenge rating and proficiency bonus equals your proficiency bonus, which is quite good, and it has 2 actions that it can choose, other than all of the classic actions that any creature could take. Every round, we're going to have to spend a bonus action in order to command the creature to take one of these actions, but that's entirely okay. Its actions are worth our bonus action, no sweat, easy peasy. The first of those actions is Flame Seed. Ranged weapon attack, range 60 feet, 1d6 plus proficiency bonus fire damage, and it uses our spell attack modifier, which is our wisdom, and we've pumped everything into our wisdom, so that's lovely. This creature has as high to hit a chance with a 1d6 plus something fire damage as a base level 1 like fighter with a hand crossbow, assuming they don't have crossbow expert. That's really good. This bumps our action economy immensely from every round forward. And if we wanted to build a blaster single target DPR at range focused druid, we could totally do that with this spell and with other things, or with this action and with other things. But the thing that jumps out to me as most interesting is the second action, Fiery Teleportation. The spirit, and each willing creature of your choice within 5 feet of it teleport up to 15 feet to unoccupied spaces you can see. Then each creature within 5 feet of the space that the spirit left must succeed on a dexterity saving throw against your spell save DC, or take 1d6 plus proficiency bonus fire damage. There are a couple things about this spell that need to be, or about this action, not a spell, that need to be talked about. First is, this is an action from the Wildfire Spirit, which happens then immediately after your turn, sharing your initiative count, and only occurs if you take a bonus action to command the spirit to do this. So, we're burning our bonus action, and what we get in exchange is, we and any creatures next to within 5 feet of the spirit can teleport up to 15 feet to unoccupied spaces you can see, that I can see. It doesn't say that they teleport together, or that they teleport as a group from like poof, poof, and like actually as a group teleport, the way that the teleport spell does. There's no implication that all of them maintain their equivalent positioning around the creature. For example, if I'm to the left of the Wildfire Spirit, first off, There's no reason that if we teleport 15 feet to the right, that I couldn't be to the right of the wildfire spirit as long as I end up within 15 feet of where I started. Cool. It also doesn't mean that we necessarily have to teleport the same direction. There is a poof of flame and me next to my wildfire spirit. My wildfire spirit blinks over here and I blink over here. Rules as written, there's nothing that would forbid this. Nothing at all. Your DM may disagree, but read the ability and there's no reason to expect that that would be the case. This is really cool and really powerful. The equivalent in terms of spell casting to allow yourself essentially for us, a bonus action to teleport would be Misty Step, burning a 2nd level spell every round. We don't even have 2nd level spells yet. But if we have our Fiery Wildfire Spirit up and we can get next to them, and if possible, we can get them and us next to an enemy, we can have our Wildfire Spirit teleport us right after our turn is complete, meaning we've already attacked and whatever during this turn. Can teleport us and maybe any allies that we have nearby 15 feet away in any direction to anywhere we want, away from that creature, and the creature has to make a dexterity saving throw against our spell DC or take 1d6 plus proficiency bonus fire damage. Now, there's no extra damage on a save. They don't take half, but it's still a nice chance to deal some extra fire damage, and it scales with our proficiency bonus, which is cool, and more importantly, we get to blink 15 feet without taking opportunity attacks for free, essentially, for a bonus action with no spell expenditure. All we have to do is expend 1 wild shape, and it lasts for an hour. Our wildfire spirit is out there for a fucking hour. It doesn't take our concentration. It doesn't take our spell slots. It doesn't take anything from us except for 1 use of wild shape and our bonus action every round, except for the first round because we have to use our action to summon it. So, our combat just changed immensely. And I think you can see at this point why I think Booming Blade is actually a more powerful choice for this character. So, we will talk about this character in both ways, as if they had taken Booming Blade and as if they had taken Green Flame Blade, because I think at this point at level 2, it becomes a wash. And I think that Booming Blade becomes more valuable and more powerful for this character. But there's maybe a reason why you want Green Flame Blade anyway. I don't know. It's up to you, man. Or woman, or anyone in between. It's up to you. I think if I were trying to optimize this character, Booming Blade is the easy choice. Same with maybe starting a level in Fighter. And maybe I'll build that out after I'm done building this way. But I think that Green Flame Blade is simply more thematic, and that's totally fine. So, let's talk about our combat now at level 2. Also, I think we get another spell prepared, which is cool. Great, we get 1 more prepped spell. We grab Long Strider so that we're faster and can get more into combat more easily. Neat, we did it. So, what does our round look like now? Well, first of all, it's going to be much easier to cast Shillelagh without problems because we don't have to attack this round, because we'll be using our action on our first round for something else. It would be ideal if we can get Warning ahead of combat and get these 2 preparatory actions done immediately or early, but on our first round, we are going to use our bonus action to cast Shillelagh, and then we are going to use our action to summon our Wildfire Spirit. Preferably, we will summon that Wildfire Spirit directly on top of an enemy and cause them to take 2d6 fire damage on a save, although we might want to safeguard our Spirit's relatively measly 15 hit points and 13 armor class right now. Now, when we summon it, it will take the dodge action immediately after our turn, because we won't have a bonus action to command it because we already cast Shillelagh. If you don't want to cast Shillelagh this turn, you don't have to, but you should, because it's going to help us in our next round. But then the creature will take its dodge action, having already done damage this turn. It probably won't get hit, but it might. You be as safe as you want to with this. Regardless, our first turn will be summon the Wildfire Spirit and cast Shillelagh. Our second turn will be much more interesting. We will run up in combat next to our Wildfire Spirit, and we will whack the goblin or whatever is right next to it. We will whack them with Booming Blade. And then we will use our bonus action to command our Wildfire Spirit to, essentially, when it gets the chance, to use its action to Fiery Teleportation and teleport us and our Wildfire Spirit wherever we want to go within 15 feet of our current location. We both get to poof out and deal an extra d6 potentially plus proficiency bonus of fire damage to the creature that we were next to. Maybe multiple creatures. If there are 2 creatures next to each other, we cast Green Flame Blade and we bonk the one and we deal some extra fire damage to the other, and then both of them take fire damage from our Fiery Teleportation, and then we leave their radius and we're no longer in melee with them. Obviously, if we have Booming Blade, that means that the creature is probably going to have to move, triggering the extra D8 rider of Booming Blade, which might be more damage overall at this point in the game and maybe in the future. So do whichever you please, whichever you feel is correct. I still don't think it's terribly unthematic, because Booming Blade lightning is kind of like fire, and I think of them as the same because Avatar exists. But that's our round. That's good. So we deal 1d8 plus 4, plus potentially 4 because of Buko Mixo damage. On our first round, we got to deal maybe 2d6 of fire damage because of the explosion of fiery stuff as we summon our whatever it is, our phoenix or whatever kind of creature our wildfire spirit is. And I love that our wildfire spirit isn't a particular creature. We get to choose and flavor it however we want and do whatever we want with it. There's a one-shot that's coming up, and I've built a character that's very much like this, and I'm calling that character Cash Betchum. And Cash Betchum is a Pokemon trainer who wants to be the very best that no one ever was. He is a 3.5-foot tall half-goblin, halfling, who wears a red and white baseball cap with a little green symbol on it, and a little vesty thing, and has brown hair and brown eyes, and he could do it. He wants to be the very best. He is Cash Betchum. And this is his build, essentially. There are some differences. He takes custom lineage and takes a feat at level 1 in order to get a permanent familiar, which is very useful, as well as taking a feat at level 1 to get Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, which is very cool. I think you could do that pretty reasonably. All you do in this situation is you take custom lineage, you eat the fact that your AC is going to be 1 down and your con is going to be 1 down per level, and that's just something you have to deal with. You take Magic Initiate Wizard, you grab 2 cantrips of your choice, Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, and you grab the Find Familiar spell, and you're done. You have a familiar. You will be making your Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade attack with advantage because of your familiar every round, and that's wonderful, and your familiar acts on its own. Shit, man, I'm convincing myself that that's way more powerful than this high half-elf, actually. Is a +1/+1 worth having that online at level 1? I think it is. I think both are worthwhile in different sets. I'm going to stick with what we've got. I think that it's reasonable and way more powerful to choose either Custom Lineage or Variant Human and go for Magic Initiate Wizard, grab Booming and Green Flame Blade, easy peasy, and grab yourself the Find Familiar spell. Either one works. You're either, with our stats the way that they are, you're either going to have +1 lower to your Wisdom, which hurts, or you're going to have +1 lower to your AC and +1 lower to your Constitution. They both hurt. It all hurts. It's all a trade-off. It all sucks. As it is, we can get most of what we want now, and if we're willing to expend a use of our Wild Shape beforehand, we can have a Familiar for an hour. Because half our Druid level, we could have a familiar for an hour, and we won't have any more wild shapes, but we get them back on a short rest. So going into particularly valuable, particularly important combats during our adventuring day, we also won't have the chance to resummon our Wildfire Spirit, which kind of sucks as well, or do the other things that Wild Shape is good for, but we could expend a use for a Wild Shape to summon a familiar, preferably an owl, and we could make that one Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade attack on our turn, every turn with advantage, and that would be very nice for us because it's a big chunk of our damage. Lovely. This is us at level 2. I think we're great as a character build. We deal 1d8 plus 4 plus extra rider effects, depending on Booming or Green Flame Blade, and then we deal 1d6 plus 2 fire damage in that area, and we get ourselves the fuck out of dodge. We can use any additional movement speed. I guess we can't because the turn happens after ours. Our Wildfire Spirit can then use its movement speed if it would like to and reposition itself and keep itself safe, which is very nice. And basically, we go into combat, attack somebody, do a bunch of rider effects, do an explosion of fire damage, and poof, Foot Clan out. Wonderful. Absolutely lovely. Most martial characters wish that they could do this. Most rogues wish that they could do this. Most swashbucklers wish that they could do this. Hell, there's a version of this build that is rogue-based, and instead of using a quarterstaff, is using like a scimitar or a rapier, which could be a thing that it uses, and goes for that big buko sneak attack damage because the Wildfire Spirit is an ally that's standing right next to the creature, so you stab them, you get sneak attack, or you use a familiar to get advantage, then you Wildfire Spirit, poof, teleport away, still add rider effects from Booming Blade or whatever, deal more buko damage. Lovely. Super fantastic. But We're a druid, and there are other reasons that we're in druid other than wanting to do rogue things. So let's go ahead and assume that with our crazy weird combo that we've now debuted to our dungeon master, and our dungeon master scratching their head trying to figure out how they can deal with us now that we've become a teleporting whirlwind of flaming bullshit, because that is what we are, and that is how your DM is going to feel. They're going to be like, why can't I kill you? Fuck you. Well, we're probably going to survive till our next level and reach level 3. So let's go ahead and do that. We hit level 3. We gain an average of 8 hit points once more. Oh, delicious. A 27 HP level 3 druid. What could be better than that? And we get nothing. Just kidding. We get second level druid spells, everybody. Now, second level druid spells are beastly. We get a couple for free, which is very, very cool. First off, we did already get Cure Wounds and Burning Hands for free from being a wildfire druid, which is lovely. We also gain Flaming Sphere and Scorching Ray. If we, for whatever reason, couldn't summon our Wildfire Spirit, we could summon a much worse version, which would be the Flaming Sphere, and would give us a bonus action that's viable and useful and deals damage and is good. Nothing wrong with that. And if we really need to shoot somebody a bunch with a lot of fire from range, Scorching Ray is a hugely potent attacking spell, total of 66 fire damage over the course of 3 attacks if we can get it. If we've got our Familiar up, we can make one of those attacks with advantage, which is lovely for us. It's really good. It's really good. Having these prepped for free is no problem. This is really nice for us. But we also get second level druid spells, and there's one in particular that we must take. We absolutely must take. There's just no way around it. We will unprepare some of our other spells, though. I think at this point, we're going to have lost a lot of the value of Goodberry. We're going to keep Healing Word. We're probably not using Longstrider except when we need to, and so we're going to have the room in terms of 3 unprepared spells to prep the spells that we need. So first off, we might want to, if we'd like to, we might want to choose to grab Healing Spirit, and the reason would be to heal up our Wildfire Spirit and ourselves and any members of our party out of combat. Now, your DM might find this to be a broken spell, might ban it in this way, but you might want to take it anyway, because it's really good. Flame Blade seems tempting, but it's not good. You can use your action to make a melee spell attack with the Fiery Blade. Is not as good as it just being a weapon that you can use. It's just not as good. Enhance ability is really cool. If you want it, Dark Vision can be really useful. Animal Messenger is situational. Gust of Wind can be neat, but it's not that great. Heat Metal is great damage over time, again, as a bonus action. Probably more valuable than something like Flaming Sphere, but it's up to you. Locate Object can be cool. Moonbeam is great damage over time as well. Pass Without a Trace is ultra valuable, to the point where, actually, I'm going to take Pass Without a Trace, and I'm going to plan to probably have it prepped all the fucking time, basically no matter what. And I think we will also take that Healing Spirit for those group heals, because that just adds so much versatility to our character, and the ability to burn one of our higher level spell slots, a second level spell, in order to heal anybody who walks through the spirit for 1d6 10 times for a total of 10d6. No, the spirit can heal. They changed it. Spirit can heal a number of times equal to 1 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. So it's still 5 times. Totally worth it. 5d6 of healing for a second level spell. Worth. I think if we were cleric, we could take Prayer of Healing. Might be better, but I don't think so. We could do all sorts of shenanigans. We could spike growth and use Thorn Whip to pull people through it. That would be really cool. But the biggest change to our character and the biggest bump to our damage comes at this level, and it is 1 spell below spike growth. It is the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything Summon Beast spell. Now, we're going to have to find ourselves a feather, a tuft of fur, and a fish scale, as well as a gilded acorn worth 200 gold pieces. Where we got this, I don't fucking know, but we're going to assume that you have spent a lot of effort, because this is your character, to get it. It has a casting time of 1 action. It is our concentration for the duration, so no more fairy fire, no more whatever we were doing for concentration. It can cast at a range of up to 90 feet, which is amazing. We get to choose a bestial spirit, air, land, or water. And the creature disappears when it drops to 0 hit points or when the spell ends. The creature is an ally to us and our companions. In combat, it shares our initiative, but takes its turn immediately after yours. And crucially, it obeys your verbal commands, no action required by you. If you don't issue any, it takes the dodge action and uses its move to avoid danger. So, it shares the same initiative count as us and our Wildfire Spirit, but while the Wildfire Spirit requires a bonus action to command it to use its action, the Summoned Beast only requires a verbal command, which we can make at any point during our turn with no action expenditure at all. This leaves us free to do literally everything that we've been doing up until this point with our action and our bonus action and all those good juju things, except that we can also simply command a summon beast to do what we want. So, what changes for us? Well, first of all, our setup is a little bit more clogged. If we don't have the chance to use an action beforehand in order to set up our shit and set all our things in motion, we're not going to be able to change much. But if we do, and we're going to assume moving forward that we have had the time, because 2 of these spells have a duration or effects, 3 if you count the summoned familiar from a wild shape, and we will. 2 of these effects last for an hour, at least. Now I think our familiar lasts for 2 hours from wild shape. Ooh, look at us. But they last for a full hour, so it should be reasonable. And it's like, we're going into the dungeon. I summon my wildfire spirit, and I also cast summon beast. Reasonable to do. Might trip you up. You might lose concentration at some point for reasons. That all sucks. That's all really rough, but I can't predict it. I'm just going to say that we're going to assume that you've done your setup round already, which means that maybe the only thing that you have to do before anything else is cast Shillelagh, because it only lasts a minute. But for now, you are going to have Shillelagh up, we're going to assume that you're burning both wild shapes to do big Buko Nova damage consistently for an entire combat, but still. You're going to use your familiar to fly in and give you the help action. You're going to have your wildfire spirit, use your bonus action to have your wildfire spirit run up next to your chosen target, and hopefully next to a couple of targets. And the wildfire spirit is not going to attack. They're instead going to hold their action until they get the chance to do something. You are going to run up to that creature, and you are, with advantage from the help from the familiar, going to make a green flame or booming blade attack with your action, swinging at them with your shillelagh for 1d8 plus 4, plus potentially 4 to somebody else, or potentially a rider effect, whatever happens. That's all very, very good. Your summoned beast, a beast of the land, as it were, and let me check the stat block, which I believe the summoned beast has pack tactics. Yes, it does. And the summoned beast makes a number of attacks equal to half this spell's level, rounded down, so 1. Your summoned beast will run up, make an attack. Since you are right next to it and you are an ally of the summoned beast, will make its attack roll with advantage, its maul attack. Its attack deals 1d8 plus 4 plus the spell's level of piercing damage, so a total of 1d8 plus 6, attacking with advantage. So it will deal that damage. And then you, on one side of your Flaming Spirit, and your Summoned Beast on the other side of the Flaming Spirit, will both end your turns, and your Summoned Beast having, or your Wildfire Spirit having held its action until the Summoned Beast has finished its attack, will then, poof, Foot Clan out and teleport all 3 of you 15 feet away, leaving your enemy high and dry and very, very injured. Your enemy during this whole round will have probably taken, assuming everything hits, and it should since you're all making attacks with advantage, will have taken at least 1d8 plus 4. A nearby enemy might take another plus 4, and 1d8 plus 6 from your Summoned Beast's small attack, again with advantage. So 2d8 plus 10 is looking pretty good. 2d8 plus 10 looks exactly like the kind of damage that, for example, a 5th level fighter with a rapier would be doing if they had maxed out dexterity or strength. That's good. That's really good. 2d8 plus 10 is not nothing. And they might take 1d6 plus 2 from your proficiency bonus fire damage from the explosion of your Flaming Spirit. And they may, if you've got Green Flame or Booming Blade, take some extra damage from rider effects. Everything that happens here is absolutely beautiful, and we love to see it. It's just really fucking lovely in every possible way. It does take some setup, but I think it's absolutely worth it. So, our combo is now complete. We are dealing better damage than a martial character 2 levels above us. We are dealing equivalent or better damage to a 3rd level character that has taken an optimized version of like the Polearm Master or Crossbow Expert feat. Our damage equals to or outpaces an optimized Crossbow Expert Rogue at this level. We're doing really fucking well. And so it stands to reason that we would survive. So we level up to level 4. Here we go. Boop, and we get an ASI. And I'm going to be really simple with this because I'm running out of time. Boom, Boom. It does the most for our damage. It does the most for our summons. It does the most for our spells known. It does the most for our Wildfire Spirit. It's the best option. We take this. It doesn't change that much for our class, for the way that we work. It's just that we deal 1d8 plus 5. Our Wildfire Spirit deals a little bit more damage because the spell save DC goes up. Our spell save DC goes up. Our weapon attacks go up. All of our everything goes up. It's lovely. It's just lovely. Just lovely. And we're just going to assume that we level up past here and we hit level 5. When we hit level 5, we get 3rd level Druid spells. There is no spell that is a better use of our concentration than Summon Beast. There just isn't. You could make an argument for Summon Fae, maybe, but I don't think it works. I don't think it's better. Grab whichever 3rd level spells you would like. I think we gain Fireball at this level or some other cool shit. No, we gain Plant Growth and Revivify as a Wildfire Spirit. Why? I don't know, but having Revivify free prepped is really nice. Grab whichever spells you want. Other than that, Flame Arrows could be cool. I don't know. It's concentration, though. Dispel Magic would be great. Grab that, why not? You could, of course, conjure animals, but I don't think it's as cool. Call Lightning is great DPR if you want it, but mostly what we're going to be doing is just using our spells to cast more Summon Beasts and do more stuff. And that's fucking great. Lovely. Our character doesn't change that much at level 5. What does change is the damage output, because Green Flame Blade now deals an extra d8 of damage on a hit, and an extra d8 of damage to its secondary target. So our overall DPR goes up significantly from that alone. If we are booming blading again, which is a good idea because we have a way of getting out of melee and essentially forcing enemies to move toward us, then booming blade will deal more damage. We might be able to acquire some scale mail or a breastplate by now and bump our armor class by another 2, giving us an AC of 18. We might be able to find a magic stick or a magic staff, which might be great for us. If we can, that would be lovely. If we can't, it's totally fine. But in general, our strategy remains the same through this level. And it's a good strategy, so who would expect it to change? Hopefully, however, we move up to level 6 and gain Enhanced Bond. At 6th level, the bond with your Wildfire and Spirit enhances your destructive and restorative spells. Whenever you cast a spell that deals fire damage or restores hit points while your Wildfire Spirit is summoned, roll a d8 and you gain a bonus equal to the number rolled to 1 damage or healing roll of the spell. In addition, you can cast spells from yourself or from the Wildfire Spirit. Great. Deals fire damage. We cast a spell every round that deals fire damage, at least with one of these builds. It's called Green Flame Blade. And now it has a damage roll on both the main hit and the rider effect. If you can convince your DM that it's the same fire damage because it's fire that leaps from one to the other, then maybe you can apply this d8 of extra fire damage to both. Even if you can't, it still means that you can apply it to the first roll. And that means that our total damage per round, if everything hits, is 1d8 plus 5 for our wisdom, plus 1d8 of fire damage from Green Flame Blade, plus 1 more d8 of fire damage from Green Flame Blade for a total of 3d8 plus 5 of fire damage. Then our Wildfire Spirit runs up and is next to them. Our Summon Beast runs up and makes an attack with advantage for 1d8 plus 4 plus 3, because we would be casting Summon Beast as a 3rd level spell. Gives it more hit points and stuff. So it will be dealing another d8, so 4 total d8s of damage, plus 7. So we will be dealing a total of 4d8 plus 12, plus potentially 1d6 plus 3 from our fire damage from our exploding elemental, and then maybe an extra d8, maybe an extra 2d8s plus 5 of fire damage to a nearby creature, which is lovely, for a potential of 6d8 maybe, of consistent damage every round, attacking with advantage, Summon Beast attacking with advantage, explosion from the Fire Spirit, moving out of range, in order to deal some pretty big buko damage every round consistently with a melee druid while never staying in melee with an enemy and having a whole squad of monsters to support you. I think that's a pretty cool build. I think that's exactly where we're going to leave it off at 6th level. I did mention that you could do this as a 5th level druid with 1 level of fighter. I think what you do there is you take the perhaps dueling fighting style or maybe the interception fighting style, because interception will allow you to impose your shield and reduce damage taken by either your Wildfire Spirit or your Summon Beast or maybe your allies, and that will give you all more survivability. As well as that, you get better proficiencies. You get proficiency in Constitution saving throws, so you can keep your Summon Beast up more, and you get second wind, which lets you keep yourself in the fight a little bit longer and be a little bit tankier. All very good things. And you still get up to Druid level 5. We don't get the Rider effect of the extra d8 of fire damage, which is why I would say take Booming Blade instead, take a custom lineage build with that version, and just move and pop away and cause them to take the Rider effect when they have to move. Wonderful. That's how I would do this build. That's how I would recommend that you do this build. I hope that this has been enjoyable, and my roommate or my friend who's going to the gym with me is here, and so I have to bounce. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much. I will see you next time for more of the same. Peace.